The X-Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Anybody here seen my old friend Abraham? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed good they die young. You know, I just looked around and he's gone. Anybody here seen my old friend John? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed good they die young. I just looked around and he's gone.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Jack Duffy, and we're going to be talking to Jack, who is an expert on the JFK assassination, about his new book, The Man from 2063. And we're going to be talking to Jack about the conspiracy side of the assassination of President Kennedy. As you know, Exonation, this is one of the most talked about, internationally known, alleged conspiracies. Now, for more information on Jack, there's a wonderful website, www.themanfrom2063.com is the website for Jack's book, The Man from 2063. And it's also available at tatepublishing.com/bookstore. So, first of all, Jack has interviewed many eyewitnesses, including Marina Oswald, and several of the Parkland physicians who treated JFK, in addition to many researchers who have written books on JFK's assassination. Jack has received his BA in Political Science from Texas Tech University, his MBA from Baylor University, and his JD from South Texas College of Law. He lives in Haltom City, Texas, where he works as an attorney and has one of the largest private collections of material on the JFK assassination. Joining me now is Jack Duffy. And Jack, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you. It's nice to be on your show today.
Super to have you with us, Jack. In 1963, November the 22nd, President JFK was assassinated in the streets of Dallas, Texas. There's many people who have many conspiracy theories. The Warren Commission didn't get very much accomplished, in my opinion. We had the assassination of Lee Harvey Oswald, and then Jack Ruby was arrested and he passed away in prison. It seems that no matter what happens, there's never closure to this assassination, this conspiracy. Why do you think that is?
Correct. I think the reason why the Kennedy assassination continues to fascinate millions of people around the world is because we don't have all the answers after almost 50 years. There's massive amounts of evidence that has come out over the last 5 decades that proves without any doubt in my opinion, that there was another shooter besides Oswald, and that's assuming Oswald was even a shooter to begin with. So if you have two or more shooters, you have a conspiracy. I can go into the evidence here to go further into what I'm talking about if you want me to at this point, or if you want to ask me some more questions.
Well, I think what we're going to do, Jack, is we're going to take a commercial break, because once you start talking about the evidence of the conspiracy, I don't want to interrupt you unless I really have to, and we've got less than a minute to our commercial break. So what we'll do, Jack, is we'll take our break now, and you and I will return in 2 minutes. Jack Duffy is my very special guest this hour, Exonation. We're talking about the assassination of JFK, but we're also talking about a brand new book by my guest this hour, The Man from 2063. The website where you can find out all the information you need to purchase this book is at www.themanfrom2063.com. Jack Duffy's my guest, and Jack and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed good they die young. You know, I just looked around and he's gone.
Gave it a great deal of thought, Grandpa. And afterwards...
Here is a bulletin from CBS News. In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. The first reports say that President Kennedy has been seriously wounded by this shooting. More details just arrived. These details about the same as previously. President Kennedy shot today just as his motorcade left downtown Dallas. Mrs. Kennedy jumped up and grabbed Mr. Kennedy. She called, "Oh no," the motorcade sped on. United Press says that the wounds for President Kennedy perhaps could be fatal. Repeating, a bulletin from CBS News, President Kennedy has been shot by a would-be assassin in Dallas, Texas. Stay tuned to CBS News for further details.
Exonation, Jack Duffy's my very special guest. Jack is the author of a new book, and I'm going to tell you something. I know there are untold scores of JFK assassination conspiracy theorists out there, and this would be an ideal Christmas gift. The name of the book is The Man from 2063, or The Man from 2063, and the website is www.themanfrom2063.com. Jack, as far as you're concerned, and I know you've done an enormous amount of research into the Kennedy assassination, what about the medical side, about the medical doctors who treated or examined Kennedy in Dallas, Texas, to where he was first taken? What do we know about that?
I spoke with 2 of the doctors personally, Dr. Robert McConnell, who's still alive in Dallas today, and Dr. Charles Crenshaw, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. Both of those doctors told me that they observed a large exit wound in the rear of President Kennedy's head in the operating room there at Parkland Hospital that proved to them that the shot that killed him came from the front, not from the rear. All the other doctors in the operating room were interviewed over the years. Unfortunately, most of them have died, but they gave interviews many years ago on videotape, and I've seen all those interviews, and they all agreed with Dr. McClellan and Dr. Crenshaw that there was a huge exit wound in the back of the president's head. They also thought that the bullet hole in President Kennedy's throat was an entrance wound, which means it also came from the front. Dr. Malcolm Perry said that to the media on the day of the assassination. He did the tracheotomy on President Kennedy's throat, and he said that from the very beginning and never changed his story much. He's deceased now, unfortunately, but he also believes that there was a frontal shot into the throat. So the evidence from these doctors is pretty powerful. They also looked at the autopsy photos, and I've seen the autopsy photos, the ones that were actually taken of the president's body, and the autopsy photos back them up and show a huge exit wound in the back of the president's head. So when you put all that together, it's pretty difficult to say that the shot didn't come from the front. That's number one. So also the impact of the president's head with a bullet hitting him in the head, as you see it on the Zapruder film, his head goes back into the left in a violent motion, which is consistent with a shot coming from the right front, not from the rear. Also, a portion of the president's skull went on the trunk of the car, along with parts of his brain and blood. That wouldn't have happened if the bullet had come from the rear. That's just physics, Bullets travel in certain directions, and they go. The brain matter is going to fly in the direction the bullet's flying. Officer Bobby Hargis, who's still alive in Dallas, was riding to the left. He was a motorcycle policeman. He was riding to the left and rear of the limousine. He was splattered by the president's brain and blood matter from the impact of the fatal shot to the head. He would not have been hit with that if the shot had come from Oswald from the rear.
Why is there a conspiracy? Why don't we know the truth some 50 years later?
Well, probably because whoever did it or was involved in the execution of the conspiracy was high up in the government, in my opinion, or was connected to people high up in the government. And this was a political murder done for political reasons. And once they had Oswald in the grave where he couldn't defend himself anymore, it was easy just to pin the blame on him and call him a lone nut communist and forget about it. I think the truth, unfortunately, got buried because the people who did it, had so much to lose if the truth did come out. And we might have been in a war with Russia or Cuba at the time if the truth had come out that the CIA or somebody connected with the CIA along with the underworld had killed Kennedy. So that's just my speculation on why the truth's been covered up.
Now, I also know that you've interviewed many of the witnesses that actually saw the assassination, and I was wondering if we could talk about what the witnesses told you.
Yes. Well, Jean Hill was one of the key witnesses. Unfortunately, she's dead now, but she's the lady in the red raincoat that you see in the Zapruder film. She was looking right at the grassy knoll when the president was hit in the head. She told me that there's no doubt about the fact that the shot came from behind the fence on the grassy knoll. She saw the flash of the gun go off, heard the shot, saw the gun smoke come off the knoll. She ran up there and was put in a chokehold by a man who was dressed in a suit and tie, who said he was with the FBI or Secret Service. Bill Newman, who I spoke with just the other day, he and his wife were the closest eyewitnesses to the assassination. They were 10 feet from the limousine when the president was hit in the head. And Mr. Newman, over the years, has told me he believes that the shot could have come from the grassy knoll. He didn't want to commit conclusively, but he said he couldn't rule it out. That it could have come from the depository or the knoll, but he didn't rule out the grassy knoll either. Sam Holland, who I didn't get to interview, he's deceased. He was on the railroad overpass. He saw the shot, heard the shot go off the knoll, and ran behind there and saw muddy footprints behind the fence where the shot had been fired. So there was somebody standing there because it had rained that morning, and there was mud all in the back of behind the fence, and he saw where the footprints were, where the man had been standing there. Abraham Zapruder, who took the famous film of the assassination, told investigators that the shot had come from the grassy knoll, the one that hit the president in the head. Beverly Oliver, another witness, said the same thing. Gordon Arnold, who was a Korean War veteran who was standing on the grassy knoll, said the shot came right from behind him, from behind the fence. So there were numerous, over 50 eyewitnesses who said that the fatal shot came from the grassy knoll, not from the schoolbook depository.
What is your opinion? Now, Jack, what I love about talking to you is you're a lawyer. You're trained to ask questions. And I'm pretty sure that when somebody's giving you a bunch of bunk compared to when they're really telling the truth. So I'm sure that this works in your favor. But what about the Warren Commission? Here you've got allegedly people who are looking to find an answer, and they come up with one of the dumbest speculations that I've ever heard.
Well, I don't want to sit here and just demean the Warren Commission, but I think they covered this up for whatever reason at the time in 1964. Earl Warren told people that the truth on the assassination wouldn't come out in their lifetime. I mean, he made that comment. Yeah. Gerald Ford, who was the last surviving member, former President Ford, of course, defended the Warren Commission's conclusions throughout his lifetime. I don't know if he really believed that, or if he was just doing that to cover himself. I mean, I don't know. I do know that the Warren Commission saw or at least Earl Warren saw the autopsy pictures. I don't know if the rest of the commission did. They also saw the Zapruder film, so they knew what the film showed. And I have a feeling that they knew the truth, but they couldn't tell the American people for whatever reason back in 1964. I mean, that's just speculation on my part.
Speaking about speculation, I've spoken to people who believe that President Kennedy was or still is alive, that he survived the assassination attempt, and that he was actually put into a vegetable state because of the assassination.
Well, if you see the autopsy pictures and you talk to the doctors, you know good well the president didn't survive. There's no way in the world anyone could have survived that kind of damage, brain damage, and it was horrible the way his head was shot off. So that's just completely ridiculous to make those. I've heard that story before. So,
what about the story? What about the story, Jack? That people out there are saying that it was the U.S. Secret Service officer who was sitting in the front seat who actually turned around and fired upon President Kennedy.
Yeah, that's been proven to be a falsehood. The film sort of makes you think that when you look at it, but when you slow it down and look at each frame, the driver of the car, Mr. Greer, certainly didn't have a gun in his hand, and so there's no way that he shot President Kennedy. That's been pretty well tossed out.
Single bullet theory. Your opinion?
That's the famous theory that Arlen Specter came up with.
Yeah.
He, of course, is the senator that died recently. He came up with this theory that one bullet was fired from Oswald's rifle that went through President Kennedy's body, went into his back, upper neck, and came out his throat, and then went on and hit Governor Connally and did all the damage to Governor Connally. And that was the only way they could have a single assassin because there were 3 shots that were supposedly fired, and they had to account for all 3 bullets. One bullet missed the car completely and hit James Tague, or a piece of the concrete flew up and hit James Tague, who I've met. He's another eyewitness. So they had a problem. They had to make all the other wounds fit the 2 bullets. Of course, one bullet hit President Kennedy in the head, so everything else had to be caused by one more bullet. So that was their dilemma here, and that's why they came up with that theory. A lot of people think it's scientifically valid. I just don't believe it for a lot of reasons. Number one, the bullet that went through Connally, the doctors that did the surgery on Governor Connally both said that, in their opinion, it was impossible for one bullet to have gone through Kennedy and also done all the damage to Connally. They said that the trajectory of the bullet didn't line up correctly for that to happen. In addition, the bullet itself, the magic bullet that everybody calls it because it looks magic, it went through Connally's wrist and also part of his rib. The wrist is one of the densest bones in the body, and when they've done tests on similar ammunition like Oswald's, and they fired bullets into cadavers' wrists, every bullet that has ever gone through a wrist has come out completely deformed like you would expect, except somehow this bullet magically comes out looking perfectly pristine, which is ballistically impossible. Also, there are more fragments in Governor Connally's wrist to this day than were missing from that bullet, supposedly, so we've got some problems there. The shot that hit Kennedy in the back did not hit him in the upper neck because we have the pictures from the autopsy. We also have his body, pictures of his back from the autopsy, and we also have the clothing, the jacket and the shirt. The bullet was much further down. It was like 4 to 5 inches below his neckline. So a bullet coming down on a downward trajectory hitting the president in the lower back could not possibly come out of his throat and go on to hit Connally. It's just a physical impossibility. Connally also said he never believed it. That's the most damning thing about this. Governor Connally disagreed with the theory, and he should know he was in the car. He got hit. Exactly. He was an experienced hunter. He said there's no way that one bullet hit both of them. He said that to the day he died.
Just one quick question before we take our news break at the bottom of the hour, Jack. In your opinion, is there a connection between the assassination of President John F. Kennedy and the assassination of Senator Bobby Kennedy? Well, I don't want to say that that the same people killed both of them. I mean, there's theories that that's what happened. I haven't studied Robert Kennedy's assassination as much as I have President Kennedy, but I know Robert Kennedy did his own investigation behind closed doors into his brother's death, and he had told some close friends that once he became president, he would find out the truth about what happened to President Kennedy. That's one of the theories about why he was killed, because the people that killed JFK could not afford to have him come in and find out what they'd done, and therefore they had him killed as well. So that's just another theory. Jack, please stand by. It's a great pleasure talking to you, sir. Exonation, our guest this hour is Jack Duffy. He's the author of The Man from 2063. The website is www.themanfrom2063.com. And I'd like to send out a thank you to Charlie Barrett for helping make this interview happen. Charlie, you're a great guy. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, and my special guest of this hour, Jack Duffy. Don't go away.
Anybody here
At the airport in Dallas, and throughout the streets of Dallas, the Dallas police had been augmented by some 400 policemen called in on their day off because there were some fears and concerns in Dallas that there might be demonstrations, at least, that could embarrass the president. Because it was only on October the 24th that our ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, was assaulted in Dallas, leaving a dinner meeting there. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
See my old friend Martin. Can you tell me where he's gone?
Welcome back, everyone. That was Walter Cronkite of CBS News breaking down as he read to the masses who were watching their TV that day after they learned the news that President Kennedy had been shot in his motorcade in Dallas, Texas, that indeed the president was dead. My guest this hour is Jack Duffy. Jack is the author of a fascinating book entitled The Man from 2063. And his website is www.themanfrom2063.com. First of all, Jack, again, thank you very much for joining us. I know that you're a very busy lawyer in Texas, and you took time out of your schedule just to join us. It is much appreciated, sir.
Well, it's an honor to be on your show today.
I'd like to talk to you if I can, and if you have any reservations about answering any questions that I have, please let me know. I respect the privacy and the hard work and the diligence that you've taken into writing your book, The Man from 2063. But I'd like to talk to you about, and this is, if you would, the possible connection between the CIA and the assassination.
Yes. First of all, in my book, the person who's behind the assassination is a rogue CIA agent who's based on some real people. There's a lot of evidence that points to CIA involvement in the murder of President Kennedy, and this has come out over the last 5 decades. A lot of this has come out in recent years. Mm-hmm. For starters, there's new evidence now that the CIA recruited Oswald in Japan to go over to Russia and spy on the Russians. Oswald went over in 1959 and stayed for 3 years, and he claimed to be a defector, that he wanted to defect to the Soviet Union and stay over there because he hated America. It turns out there was a program in place where the CIA was sending impoverished American men over there on the pretense that they hated the United States and they wanted to become communists and serve the USSR and become citizens over there. And documents that have come out recently have shown that Oswald was on the CIA payroll and that he was trained and sent over there to be a spy. Oswald was seen in Dallas in the weeks before the assassination with a man named David Phillips, who was the head of the CIA's assassination program at the time. The reason why we know this is because a Cuban who was an anti-Castro exile was there to meet Phillips at this hotel in downtown Dallas, and he came in a little bit ahead of the appointment schedule, and he saw another man talking with Phillips, and so he waited until they were through talking, and then the man left. He asked Phillips who the guy was he was talking to, and he just said, he's just the guy that's working with us. And it turns out that the man was Lee Harvey Oswald, according to this Cuban, because he identified Oswald from photos later on. If that's true, then we have a connection with David Phillips and Lee Harvey Oswald in the weeks before the assassination. The day of the assassination, according to another researcher, a CIA plane came down to Dallas right after Kennedy was killed and picked up 2 men on a deserted road near Oak Cliff where Oswald was picked up for killing Officer Tippit. 2 of the men got on the plane, and one of them supposedly was a lookalike for Oswald or resembled Oswald closely. And this goes into the imposter theory that many researchers have put forth over the years, that there was an imposter in Dallas impersonating Oswald in the weeks leading up to the assassination. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Other things, George de Mohrenschildt, who was a wealthy petroleum geologist who was connected with the CIA, became good friends with Lee Harvey Oswald. And according to other researchers, they believe de Mohrenschildt was the CIA's handler for Oswald, and that's why de Mohrenschildt became friendly with Oswald. There's lots of evidence that points to the CIA, having a motive to kill the president. President Kennedy had threatened just to splintered the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scattered to the winds. He was very upset with the CIA after the Bay of Pigs failed. He fired Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA. So there was a lot of disenchantment with the military and with the CIA about Kennedy's policies and what he was going to do in the future. President Kennedy had told his close advisors that he was going to start a gradual withdrawal of all troops and advisors out of South Vietnam starting in 1964 and 65. And he signed an actual document several weeks before he was killed. And then, of course, Lyndon Johnson did the exact opposite. After he became president, he escalated the war in Vietnam. So there's a lot of evidence that points to the CIA having a motive to get rid of President Kennedy.
What do we know about Oswald that hasn't already been told? Was he in the book depository? Was it an imposter? What else do we now know about Oswald that we didn't know 50 years ago?
Well, Oswald was in the building. There's no question about that. The question is, was he in the window with a rifle? A lady named Carolyn Arnold, who was an employee of the School Book Depository, signed an affidavit that day where she said she saw Oswald in the lunchroom on the second floor around 12:15, which was 15 minutes before Kennedy was killed. Outside in the BB Plaza, there were eyewitnesses who remember seeing a man in the window with a gun on the sixth floor at the same time at 12:15 because there was a Hertz rent-a-car sign on the top of the building. It's not there anymore, but it was there on the day of the assassination, and it flashed the time and the temperature. So if the timing is correct, and of course that could be wrong, but if the timing is correct, then obviously Oswald couldn't be in the lunchroom and on the sixth floor at the same time. They did a paraffin test on Oswald's face that day to see if there was any gunpowder residue on his face from firing a rifle, and it came back negative. Now, that's not 100% conclusive, but you can't ignore that. Oswald said he was a patsy when he was arrested, that he was being framed. Also, Oswald mentioned two people that were in the lunchroom, two other employees that he said were down there, who in fact were down there, and he would not have known that if he'd been on the sixth floor, shooting Kennedy.
Was he? What do we know about his military past? Do we know what he did in the military? And according to what I've heard before, whoever, if he was to have shot President Kennedy, as the public is led to believe, he would have had to have been one hell of a shot. Was he?
Well, he qualified as a sharpshooter. He qualified 1 point over the minimum to be a sharpshooter, which is the second level in the Marine Corps. The highest level is an expert. He never qualified as an expert. And then when he later retested, he just barely qualified as a marksman, which is the lowest level of shooting ability. It's interesting because they've done tests with his rifle over the years. Several expert marksmen have tried to duplicate what he did using that kind of a gun, shooting from the same height, distance, and shooting at moving targets, and they can't do it. If anybody's done it, they did it with a different rifle, or they were a much better shot than Oswald. So his marksmanship's been called into question. A lot of the Marines that served with Oswald testified that he was a poor shot, that they saw him shoot on the range, and he couldn't even hit stationary targets, much less a moving limousine like Kennedy's. So, he was anything but a great shot.
We look at the entire scenario about what happened in Dallas. We know, or we have been told, that the security people responsible for Kennedy knew that something was going to be happening in Dallas, Texas, and yet they went ahead and allowed the president to go through the streets of Dallas in a motorcade with the top down.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, but they uncovered a plot to kill President Kennedy in Chicago 3 weeks before he was killed in Dallas. He was supposed to be in a motorcade in Chicago, and they canceled the motorcade because they uncovered a potential plot to assassinate him there. He was also there was also a plot to kill him in Miami, Florida, before he came to Texas, and that was uncovered. And they canceled the motorcade and flew him to the Orange Bowl on a helicopter. So there were other plots that were uncovered before he was killed in Dallas. So you would think that they would have taken more precaution when he was in a motorcade here in Texas.
Exactly. I don't think there's anybody listening to our interview tonight who at one time or other has not seen the footage of Lee Harvey Oswald being taken out of the courthouse by the Texas law enforcement officers, and Jack Ruby coming out of a crowd and shooting Oswald in the stomach. What do we know about the connection between Jack Ruby and the CIA, if any?
Well, I've done some research on that. It's not as clear about whether or not he was connected to the CIA as it is that he was connected to the underworld. Ruby came from Chicago originally and worked or knew Al Capone, was a runner for Capone, and then Ruby came down to Dallas and opened up the nightclub business, or started up in the nightclub business with the mob's aid. The first people that visited Ruby after he shot Oswald were mafia people. Before he shot Oswald, he was receiving phone calls from high-level mobsters in the weeks before the assassination. Ruby hinted after he killed Oswald that there had been a conspiracy. He just didn't know who was involved, or he wouldn't say who was involved, but he did hint. His exact words were something to the effect that the people who put me in this position are so high up and powerful that the truth will never come out. He also told his psychiatrist that he was framed into killing Oswald, that he killed Oswald to shut him up. So Ruby was stalking Oswald throughout the whole week, and they have film footage of him in the hallways there as they're leading Oswald down the hallway on Friday and Saturday. So he was definitely interested in Oswald. He was at the midnight press conference Friday night when Oswald was brought down for questioning. So there's evidence that he was stalking Oswald or following Oswald around, waiting for the right opportunity maybe to shoot him.
Hmm. You mentioned briefly before the Tippit murder.
Yes.
Now that's, how does this work into the grand scheme of things?
Well, that's a whole separate murder. It's controversial. Of course, a lot of people believe that Oswald killed Tippit. I'm not convinced totally that he killed Tippit. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that points both ways. They've done tests where they had people walk from Oswald's rooming house to the scene where Tippit was shot and had him walk at a fast trot, and they couldn't even get there in time to shoot Tippit. There's no evidence that Oswald ever was given a ride to the location where Tippit was shot. They did a paraffin test on Oswald's hands, and the nitrates did show up on his hands, but they showed up on his palms, and more so than on the outside of the hand, which means if he shot a pistol, that's hard to explain why the nitrates are on the back of the hand instead of the palm area. Another researcher claims that they took fingerprints off Tippit's car, and the fingerprints don't match Oswald. This was that the killer put his hands on the car, and I don't know if that's accurate or not. That's something I read. There were different bullets found, or different shell casings found at the scene of the crime. 2 of them were from a revolver, 2 were from an automatic, and Oswald had a revolver. Another policeman, Officer McDonald, testified, or I saw where he testified that there were no shells had been fired out of Oswald's pistol. That they were all intact shells. So you've got a lot of controversy about this thing. Some witnesses say it was Oswald. Others say that more than one person killed Tippit. Tippit was out of his area of normal patrol, and that's never been satisfactorily explained what he was doing over in Oak Cliff at the time. There's a lot of unknown questions about the Tippit murder, too. Another lady claims that she saw 2 men shoot Tippit. So, we just don't know for sure. I mean, some people think it's an open and shut murder. I'm just not convinced that it's that simple.
I don't know if you've... there was a movie out a couple of years ago, JFK, and I was wondering if you saw the movie, and in your opinion, how close to reality was that movie?
The JFK movie?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think Oliver Stone did a really good job. I mean, some of it was fiction. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it wasn't.
Sure.
But I would say, based on my research, about 65%, 70% of that movie was based on a lot of hard evidence and a lot of hard research. Now, I don't necessarily believe that Clay Shaw was involved in a conspiracy to kill Kennedy like they portray with Jim Garrison. I mean, I don't know if Shaw was connected with the CIA, it turns out. But I'm not 100% convinced that he was involved in a conspiracy like they portray in the movie, like Garrison thought. I do think David Ferrie might have been involved. He was one of the characters that was played by Joe Pesci,
yes,
who was a mysterious individual who did know Oswald. So there was a connection between Ferrie and Oswald. And Ferrie died suspiciously, by the way, when Jim Garrison was getting ready to bring him in to testify.
Mm-hmm.
He allegedly committed suicide all of a sudden when they were getting ready to come get him. So that's another mysterious death. It's suspicious.
To your knowledge, Jack, did Jack Ruby ever try to give a story that was totally different from the mainstream stories that we've all heard about the assassination of President Kennedy?
Well, he interviewed with a lady named Dorothy Kilgallen. She was a New York Times reporter. She got the only private interview with Jack Ruby ever behind closed doors, just the 2 of them. And we don't know what they said or what was said because Dorothy Kilgallen died mysteriously before she could reveal what Ruby told her. So that's another mystery that we don't know anything about. Like I said earlier, Ruby made hints that there was a conspiracy before he died. He died of lung cancer, although he never smoked. Of course, you can get lung cancer without having to smoke, but it's usually from smoking cigarettes. And Ruby thought he had been injected with cancer himself. I mean, he made that statement before he died, and he was receiving injections. And I'm not saying the CIA injected him with cancer, but it's suspicious, how he all of a sudden came out with lung cancer.
I have a problem trying to understand, even after all of these years, why, if they in fact were involved, why the CIA did this instead of getting an outside contractor with no ties.
Well, like I said, I'm not saying the CIA killed Kennedy. I think it was a rogue element of the CIA that did it, most likely. And they did it without the CIA's approval or knowledge. I think it was rogue elements that just decided to kill Kennedy on their own, and that they put the country in an embarrassing position when they did it, because when they started digging into this, once Oswald was dead, once they started finding out what I think they found out, that Oswald had been over in Russia, maybe as a CIA agent, that they couldn't tell the American people that, and they couldn't tell the American people that, well, we know another shooter killed him, not Oswald, so they had to smooth it over and just tell the fiction that they've been telling for 50 years, that one guy did it, and he just got killed by another nut. It was just two lone nuts that changed history. That was the official story, and that's been the official story for almost 50 years now.
Jack Duffy is my special guest, Exonation. Please stand by, Jack. He is the author of The Man from 2063. His website is themanfrom2063.com. That's www.themanfrom2063.com. Jack Duffy and I return on the other side of this commercial break as we wrap up this segment of another look at the assassination of JFK. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
He freed a lot of people, but it seemed good they die young. You know, I just looked around and he's gone. Anybody here?
What your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
I've been looking at people and how they change with the times, and lately all I've been seeing are people throwing love.
All right, welcome back, Exo Nation. Jack Duffy is my very special guest this hour. We're talking about Jack's new book. It's out on the market. It's entitled The Man from 2063. And Jack's website is www.themanfrom2063.com. That's themanfrom2063.com. Jack, you mentioned briefly that a lot of other people seem to have been, well, either one way or another, died that have been associated with this case. Now, I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit more on that.
Yeah, one of the most important individuals who died mysteriously was Naval Commander William Pitzer, who took the photos, x-rays, and film of President Kennedy's autopsy at Bethesda Naval Hospital. Another researcher in a recent book interviewed a Green Beret who came forth many years later and said that he was told or offered a contract by a CIA agent to kill Pitzer. He didn't know who Pitzer was at the time, and he refused to do it. And then later on, Pitzer died suspiciously of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, supposedly. The film that he took, the 16-millimeter black and white film of the autopsy, disappeared from his lab after he was found dead in his lab. And from my understanding, his family doesn't believe he committed suicide. They're suspicious that he was murdered to shut him up. And according to this Green Beret, the CIA wanted to kill Pitzer because he was going to go public with what he had observed at the autopsy, and they were scared that was going to blow the whole case open. So goes the theory that they had him killed. Hale Boggs, who was a member of the Warren Commission from Louisiana, died in a unsolved mysterious plane crash in Alaska in the early 1970s. He was one of the few members of the Warren Commission who didn't want to sign the Warren Report. He didn't agree with its conclusions, but he signed it under duress. And he later on went public and said he didn't agree with their conclusions, that he thought there was more to it than one shooter. And then he died in a plane crash that they've never resolved to this day. Several mafia characters. Johnny Roselli was murdered in Miami. He was connected with the CIA, and he was supposedly in Dallas on the day of the assassination, from what other researchers have said. Roselli was getting ready to be subpoenaed to Washington to testify before the House Committee on the assassination, and he was murdered before he could be brought to Washington. They killed him and chopped him up in pieces and dumped him in the bay in Miami. So that's what happened to him. Sam Giancana, who was the head of the mafia in Chicago, was going to be brought to Washington to testify. He was murdered before he could be brought up to Washington. And another man, Charles Nicoletti, who was a hitman for the mob in Chicago, who was allegedly connected with the assassination, was murdered before they could bring him to Washington to testify. So there were many key people who just died violently all of a sudden. So it's all suspicious. Some people say, well, it was just a coincidence. Well, you can only believe coincidence up to a certain point.
Do you think that there will ever be another inquest into the assassination of JFK?
Probably not, unfortunately, because I don't know if the public would approve spending the kind of money it would take to do a new investigation. I've talked to people who were on the committee in the 70s, the last committee that did the investigation. By the way, that committee said it was a conspiracy. That was their conclusion. They said the underworld of the mob was the most likely party that had killed the president, but they couldn't go any further than that. They never did get any deeper about who actually killed him. I would like to see another investigation just to solve this once and for all, because I still think the truth could be elicited, even at this late date. But realistically, it probably will never happen.
Jack, I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, sir. I wish you much success, and I hope I have the opportunity of talking to you again here in the X Zone about this interesting topic.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be on your show today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's my great pleasure, sir. Jack Duffy is my guest this hour. He's the author of The Man from 2063, and his website is themanfrom2063.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And once again, I'd like to thank Charlie Barrett for helping make this interview possible. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.